during the opening remarks of this particular bulletin, road carnages has been a menace in the country year in, year out. But what can be done to curb these road carnages? The Ministry of Transport continues to give directives on what needs to be done to avert such, fatalities in future. Now, we do know that most recently, as recent as last week, there was a crash, a horrific crash, by the way, in Londiani, in Kericho County, where 52 people lost their lives. 52 people lost their lives. At least 32 other people are nursing serious injuries in hospital. Now, was this avoidable? Now, last year, in a press conference between Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen and his interior counterpart, that is Professor Kithure Kindiki, Murkomen attributed most accidents last year to human error. Now, how can we avoid all that? Now, I just want to take us through the statistics of road carnages from 2021 to date. And like you can see here, in 2021, we had a total number of 20,625 road carnages. Out of the 20,625 road carnages, 4,121 people lost their lives. 4,121 people lost their lives. Now, of the 4,121, 441 were drivers, 746 were passengers, those in the vehicles. 1,557 were pedestrians. And lastly, border drivers or motorcyclists, those who lost their lives in that year was 1,271. Now, like I said, the number continues to rise as years go by, because last year there was an increase of around 1,100 new road carnages. There was an increase as well in those who lost their lives, because previously in 2021, those who lost their lives, the number was 4,121. Last year, those who lost their lives were 4,690. An increase of around between 400 and 500 people. Now, the drivers who lost their lives last year were 426. Let's say a decline in those who lost their lives that particular year, a decline of around 15 people. That is on the drivers who lost their lives. 824 passengers lost their lives in the year 2022, an increase compared to the 746 who lost their lives in 2021. Again, pedestrians, 1,182 pedestrians lost their lives as compared to 1,157, those who lost their lives in 2021. Border operators as well, 1,255 lost their lives in 2022, a reduction of around 16 people. A positive, that was on a positive note, but still the number here, 1,255, is quite high considering the number of people operating, or those in the border industry or business in the country. Now, the only decline that we have is the number of fatalities in drivers who lost their lives between 2022 and 2021, and that of motorcyclists or border operators or drivers, if you'd like, in 2022 and 2021. Drivers, passengers and pedestrians, the numbers increased. Now, this year, up to around May 30th, that is the last week of May, the number of people, have already lost their lives this year was at around 1,756. May, that is the 5th month of the year. Now, 98 people, as at March this year, this is according to statistics by the National Transport and Safety Authority, 98 people or 98 drivers had lost their lives as at March. Now, passengers who had lost their lives as at March 2023 was 389. That is the third month of the year. Pedestrians, as at March again, who had lost their lives were at 148. Border operators or drivers or motorcyclists, if you'd love to call it that, or to call them that, beg your pardon, as at March, those who had lost their lives were 408. 2001. Now, if you're not careful enough, because the CS said attributed most accidents last year out of these 21,757 to human error. Now, the number might surpass, the number of fatalities, if you're not careful on the roads, might surpass last year's total tally, which was at 4,690. Now, this, of course, excludes the recent accident, that is the Londiani crash. Remember as well, there was an accident in Kayole in around, somewhere around March 30th this year, just to be specific, by the way, March 30th. A bus that was ferrying students of Pwani University who are going to Eldoret or the Uasin Gishu County to attend inter-university games crashed in Kayole area, Naivasha constituency in Nakuru County. Around 14 students lost their lives instantly. Now, after the Londiani crash, which happened during the weekend, the CS for Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, visited the area. And it is sad that many of those who lost their lives were traders who were trading just off the road. We understand everybody is trying to make ends meet and fend for their families. But the ministry gave directives. And I just picked some of the directives by the Ministry of Transport that is led by the former majority leader in the Senate, that is Kipchumba Murkomen. And he gave a raft of measures, directives that he wants them undertaken to ensure that road carnages can be reduced. Now, one, like I said, there's construction of markets off the highway. Now, most of those who lost their lives, like I said, were traders who were just off the road. Now, Kipchumba Murkomen, the cabinet secretary, wants markets to be constructed off the highway to prevent or to avert such cases in future. Now, he, of course, mandated the Kenya National Highways Authority to oversee the construction, because after these markets are constructed, people will need access roads to be able to get to these markets. Now, you have, of course, directed Kenya to oversee the construction of access roads to these particular markets. It is sad, just talking about markets and the traders who lost their lives, it is sad that just a day after traders lost their lives in that particular accident, those who operate in that particular road came back and they said they're only trying to fend for themselves. Now, we've had this statement many times when we have road carnage in the country, but the question remains, when will this execute? These traders be relocated to a place where it will be considered safe? Now, this as well might not be the task of the national government alone, but as well the task of the county governments as well. Now, again, Kipchumba Murkomen, the CS, ordered the retesting of public service vehicles and commercial public service vehicles, and of course commercial vehicles as well, at a fee of 1,050 to assess their competency before, of course, license renewal. This is a very contentious issue. I want to take you back to somewhere in the middle of last month, because the Long Distance Drivers and Conductors Association, of course, expressed their dissatisfaction with this particular regulation, because it is supposed to be enforced by the National Transport and Safety Authority in conjunction with the Ministry of Transport. And they said they were not consulted in coming up with this idea of course, conducting a retesting to assess the competency before the renewal of their licenses. And just to give you an overview, the directive requires that drivers with class B3, D1, D2, D3, C1, C2, and CE, and of course together with CD licenses, to undergo retesting every 3 years upon expiry of their licenses. Now, this is what the association had to say. We propose, and I quote, that the Ministry of Transport and the NTSA to introduce free refresher courses for PSV drivers as a continuous road safety training alternative, rather than imposing the costly retesting program. And they, of course, issued a strike notice. Now, moving to the next directive, of course, the National Transport and Safety Authority was as well ordered to, of course, conduct the anti-drunk driving operations countrywide. Remember, there was the Alcohol, the famous Alcohol operation. Murkomen wants that to be done as well. He wants EPRA to investigate the sale of adulterated fuel in the country. Adulterated fuel in the country. Now, talking about fuel. Most of course, drivers currently, or car owners or PSV owners in the country are lamenting at the cost of fuel. Now, like you heard before in the bulletin, is that Okiya Omtatah went to court because EPRA, that is the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, defied the suspension of the Finance Act and implemented its new fuel prices. But before I get to the fuel prices, now, these are just some of the directives that I picked out from the CS himself, Kipchumba Murkomen, who communicated that through, of course, his official Twitter handle. But the question remains, most of these directives have been given when road carnages happen. But this is the new cabinet secretary. The new tenure, the Kenya Kwanza administration came into place. His Excellency Dr. William Ruto appointed Kipchumba Murkomen to lead this particular docket. But what begs the question, will these directives be implemented this time round? Because if they will not be implemented, and it is not just the responsibility of the ministry and the National Transport and Safety Authority, but your responsibility and mine as well, to ensure that we get to observe traffic rules. They say if you're in a matatu that is overspeeding or not observing traffic rules, it is your responsibility to speak out. But at the end of the day, what matters the most is the implementation of these particular directives. This will be implemented, and the results of the implementation of these particular directives, or the fruits of these particular implementation of these directives will be felt. Time will tell. At the end of the year, we'll be looking at the statistics in regards to matters road carnages. But of course, we would like as well to condole with the family of those who lost their lives in the Londiani crash, and may God continue to comfort you. Talking about fuel, adulterated fuel as the last directive. Now, EPRA gave new prices of fuel in the country. And as I wrap up this particular explanation, just to give you the prices of the cost of fuel in the country as it stands. Petrol last month, 1 litre of petrol was costing 182.23 on average across the country, or across most towns in the country. Currently, it retails at around 195.38. That was an increase of around 13 shillings. Diesel was retailing at 167.45. Currently, it is retailing at 179.45, an increase of around 12 shillings. And finally, kerosene was retailing at 162.67 last month. That is, currently, it is retailing at 176 shillings. The new prices is what Okiya Omtatah is, of course, countering in court, and the final, of course, ruling will be made on Monday by Justice Mugure Thande. Now, that is all that I had for you today on this particular road carnage issue, but it is the hope of not only me, but each and every Kenyan, and including the ministry officials and, of course, the National Transport and Safety Authority, that finally we can be able to avert the road carnages that we continue to see day in, day out, and that we cannot continue losing our loved ones. Now, on that note, I wrap this up, but in a moment, I'll be back with sports news making headlines across the country.